Chapter 5, Part 3, Rape of the Text. Having studied all the arguments in favor of sons of Seth, one concludes that the only argument that is valid among them is that of rationality. Sons of Seth is an interpretation that is more palatable to human reason. Reason can never subscribe to the incredible notion that fallen angels could have sex relations with women of earth. Angels have no physical bodies. They do not marry. They belong to an entirely different species of being. The mind revolts against such absurdity. So, what does one do? Settle, of course, for an easy, rational interpretation. Sons of Seth and daughters of Cain. But what if the meaning of Scripture is clearly otherwise? There's the rub. Scripture is clearly otherwise. To impose a human interpretation at the expense of the obvious meaning of the divine word is a rape of the biblical text. Furthermore, when one deals with the world of the supernatural, rationality is never an argument. Jewish and patristic fathers. The Jewish fathers, when interpreting this expression from Genesis 6:2, invariably interpreted it as angels. No less an authority than W.F. Albright tells us that the Israelites who heard this section, Genesis 6:2, recited unquestionably thought of intercourse between angels and women. Philo of Alexandria, a deeply religious man, wrote a brief but beautiful treatise on the subject called Concerning the Giants. Basing his exposition on the Greek version of the Bible, he renders it as angels of God, says Bamberger. Had he found the phrase sons of God in his text, he most certainly would have been inspired to comment on it. Philo certainly took the Genesis as historical, explaining that just as the word soul applies to both good and evil beings, so does the word angel. The bad angels who followed Lucifer at a later point in time failed to resist the lure of physical desire and succumbed to it. He goes on to say that the story of the giants is not a myth, but it is there to teach is that some men are born earthborn, while others are heaven-born, and the highest are God-born. The early church fathers believed the same way. Men like Justin Martyr, Irenaeus, Athenagoras, Tertullian, Lactantius, Eusebius, Ambrose all adopted this interpretation. In the words of the ante-Nicene fathers, the angels fell into impure love of virgins and were subjugated by the flesh. Of those lovers of virgins, therefore, were begotten those who are called giants. And again, the angels transgressed and were captivated by the love of women and begat children. Nowhere before the 5th century A.D. do we find any interpretation for the sons of God, other than of angels. We cannot deny the Jewish fathers' knowledge of their own terminology. They invariably translated sons of God as angels. The testimony of Josephus, that colorful cosmopolitan and historian, is also of paramount importance. In his monumental volume, Antiquities of the Jews, he reveals his acquaintance with the tradition of the fallen angels consorting with women of earth. He not only knew of the tradition, but also tells us how the children of such union possessed superhuman strength and were known for their extreme wickedness. For the tradition is that these men did what resembled the acts of those men the Grecians called giants. Josephus goes on to add that Noah remonstrated with these offspring of the angels for their villainy. Perhaps the most conclusive argument for interpreting the expression as angels is the simplest one of all. If the writer of Genesis wanted to refer to the sons of Seth, he would have just said so. If God had intended that meaning, then the verse would undoubtedly read, "Those sons of Seth saw the daughters of Cain that were fair." But the Bible meant something far more sinister, the sexual union between angels from hell and evil women from earth. Because of the gravity of such a union and its dire consequences for the human race, God moved to destroy the race before it could destroy itself, except for one family which had not been contaminated, the ultimate sin. God made man in his own image, the highest of all his earthly creations. While God said that everything he made was good, he considered man very good. God had made man for fellowship with God himself. But he soon turned his back upon his Maker and worshipped the creature more than the Creator. Before many generations, the human race was being polluted by this abominable union with demons. It seemed that hell and earth were in league together against the God of heaven. God's righteous anger was such that he regretted having made man. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And it repented the Lord that he had made a man. Genesis 6:5-6. It was specifically because of this ultimate sin that God brought about the deluge of such magnitude that man and beast were drowned from the face of the earth. In the words of old Joseph Hall, the world was so grown foul with sin that God saw it was time to wash it with the flood, and so close did wickedness cleave to the authors of it that when they were washed to nothing, yet it would not wash off, yea, so deep did it stick in the very grain of the earth that God saw it meet to let it soak long under the waters. Why was Noah immune? Why Noah and his immediate family were the only ones immune from this great judgment is significant. Genesis 6:9 says, Noah was a just man. He stood out as an example of righteousness and godliness in a perverse age. Like Enoch before him, Noah also walked with God, but there was another reason why Noah was spared, one that seems to have escaped most commentators. Genesis 6:9 says that Noah was perfect in his generation. Does this mean moral and spiritual perfection? Hardly. Genesis 9:20-23 disproves any such perfection. What then does the Bible mean by calling him perfect? The Hebrew word is tamim and comes from the root word taman. This means without blemish. As in Exodus 12:5, 29:1, Leviticus 1:3, just as the sacrificial lamb had to be without any physical blemish, so Noah's perfection. In its primary meaning, it refers not to any moral or spiritual quality, but to physical purity. Noah was uncontaminated by the alien invaders. He alone had preserved their pedigree and kept it pure, in spite of prevailing corruption brought about by the fallen angels. And again, Noah's bloodline had remained free of genetic contamination. This implies, of course, that all other families on earth had been contaminated by the Nephilim. It also proves that the assault of Satan on the human race had been far more extensive than had been realized. It is no wonder that God pronounced such a universal fiat of judgment. As for the fallen angels who participated in the abomination, God put them in custody, in everlasting chains under darkness, unto the judgment of the great day. Jude 6. This is sometimes interpreted as Tartarus, or the nether realms, 2 Peter 2:4. This would also explain why some fallen angels are in custody and while others are free to roam the heavens and torment mankind. Such drastic punishment, both for men and angels, presupposed a drastic sin. Something infinitely more evil and more sinister than mixed marriages. It was nothing less than the demonic realm attempting to pervert the human world. By genetic control and the production of hybrids, Satan was out to rob God of the people he had made for himself. If Satan had succeeded in corrupting the human race, he would have hindered the coming of the perfect Son of God, the promised seed of the woman, who would defeat Satan and restore man's dominion. Genesis 3:15. If Satan had by any means prevented that birth, he would obviously have averted his own doom. Satan did succeed to a large extent. It was for this reason that God drowned mankind in the deluge. Are angels sexless? Interpreting the sons of God as fallen angels, the question immediately arises, do angels marry? In Matthew 22:30, Jesus said angels neither marry nor are given in marriage. This seems a clear and emphatic negative. However, it does not preclude the possibility of such a thing happening, obviously contrary to the will of God. And it does not preclude fallen angels, who had rebelled against God already, from cohabitating with women of earth, as the scriptures state. Some interpret the words of Jesus as meaning that angels do not marry among themselves. It is because they are all male? Maybe. I don't know. Or is it because celestial beings are deathless and thus need no offspring? Only terrestrial beings need to find immortality in their children. But if they do not need to marry and procreate, is it still possible that they could engage in sexual acts? If not among themselves, then with human spouses. Jude seems quite explicit on the matter. The angels left their own habitation and gave themselves over to fornication, going after strange flesh. In other words, they were capable of performing human functions, eating, drinking, walking, talking, even sexual activity, and fathering children. The fact that angels do not marry does not in itself prove that they are sexless. Throughout the Bible, angels are referred to only as men. Finis Drake writes, "It is logical to say that the female was created specifically for the human race in order that it could be kept in existence, and that all angels were created males, inasmuch as their kind is kept in existence without the reproduction process. Angels were created innumerable to start with." Hebrews 12:22, whereas the human multitudes began with one pair. Even in the next world, when the saints will dwell in their resurrection body and live forever, it does not imply that they will be sexless. The Bible teaches that everyone will have his own body in the resurrection, 1 Corinthians 15:35-38. No suggestion is made that they will be unsexed. Furthermore, Christ remained a man after his resurrection. Demons at large. One other question has been raised. If the fallen angels who lusted after women of earth in Genesis 6 have been interred in Tartarus with everlasting chains, how does one explain the demons who have been operating since then? They seem to have been quite active during the ministry of Jesus and are busy again in our day. Following this reasoning, some shared the conclusion of Kent Philpott. However, one might wish to interpret Genesis 6:1-4 to link this passage with the verses in 2 Peter and Jude seem to pose far more problems than it would solve. But 2 Peter 2-4 and Jude clearly assert that the rebellious angels are being kept prisoner in the nether gloom. If they are prisoners, they could not very well function as the demons are described as functioning in the New Testament. But Philpott failed to see that there were two categories of fallen angels: those cast out of heaven with Lucifer, and who are still free to torment mankind, and those who fell the second time by committing carnal acts with the daughters of men. The spirits in this second category are those chained in the nether regions. It seems clear to me that the sons of God are none other than fallen angels, and because of their further sin of lusting after the daughters of men, many were imprisoned by God. Both the near annihilation of the human race and the incarceration of the fallen angels in Tartarus indicate the magnitude of the sin they committed. By such drastic judgment, God saved the human race from a calamity worse than the physical death originally imposed upon them.